This is a reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
Good morning, councilors. Coming to get that check.
We will present our findings that show how vicious this country is, and how the government today still doesn't protect the rights of black people.
Listen, it's very important that we discredit this theory that they had, that all blacks are entitled to reparations, but it's also very important that we discredit these attorneys here. We can't let people like them take advantage of this. If they come up with facts, we're going to challenge every fact they have with our facts. We represent the United States of America. So we're going to win this hearing and send them back to what they do best, ambulance chasing.
There's no turning back now. We must show full confidence in our delivery, not letting them get under our skin. We must force them, though, to answer the charges being brought against America. Now, I know Mr. Feinberg, he's an old pro at this, great at making people second guess themselves. Do not, I repeat, do not let him have a second guess in anything we present, okay? Y'all ready?
Yes.
We were.
Mr. X, so good to see you again. You know, your famous quote, never give up. You people never give up. When is this going to end?
When you people, as you say, admit that we are entitled to our just due, reparations from the many years of physical, economic, and mental abuse that we've received from the time we landed in this America's rotten slave ports until this day. Listen, if the government doesn't protect us from the states that violate our rights every day, we're well within our rights to hold this country accountable.
Gentlemen and ladies, our goal is to be fair and impartial. We will listen to all the facts and apply the law fairly, and hopefully we will render a decision that will put an end to this long-standing issue between the African American community and the United States of America. And now we will have opening statements from both teams, starting with Mr. X.
Thank you, Your Honor. The government of the United States of America is hereby charged with the willful and malicious violation of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. We specifically charge the government with the denial of accepting the full citizenships of blacks, the past and continuous deprivation of life, liberty, and property without due process, and the clear denial of equal protection of the law. We further charge that the discrimination by the United States against its black citizens has been so severe and pervasive as to constitute a crime and human rights violation.
Crime? What crime are you talking about? That's an outrage. Your Honor, there is no crime. What are you talking about?
It's a crime in every sense of the word. The taking of property is called theft. The taking of slave labor for hundreds of years without compensation or without permission is also called theft. This theft from black America is a crime.
Even if we were to recognize the historic value of slave labor, saying that we will, it's something that's happened over 150 years ago. Yes, it's unfortunate, but it's in the past. A past that we cannot change. Shouldn't we just throw out your claim and let you proceed against the various states that you allege committed these violations?
As you know, Your Honor, the Fifth Amendment has a similar due process clause as the 14th Amendment that states that citizens shall not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. It is our contention that this language imposes the same obligation on the federal government as it does on the states. Your Honor, it is our position that the 14th Amendment requires that the current suit be brought against the federal government, since the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and we're suing for the U.S. government's systemic failure to enforce its own Constitution to the detriment of its own black citizens, rather than the individual violations by the states.
Boy, all I hear are words. Where is the proof?
You'll hear the proof when you let me finish, Mr. Feinberg.
Let's keep this going. Continue, Counselor.
Thank you, Your Honor. The 14th Amendment states as follows: all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States, and that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States. Now, the first two sentences establishes that blacks are full citizens of this country, and all states are prohibited from creating or enforcing any laws that discriminate against its black citizens. So that means the Jim Crow laws and all of those things.
Jim Crow. Jim Crow, look, newsflash. Jim Crow is dead.
Jim Crow is alive and well today as states like Texas and Florida renew their efforts to prevent blacks from voting by passing legislation that limit the amount of polling places in black neighborhoods. Jim Crow, together today with states and federally mandated redlining, in-home financing, the Discriminatory Social Security Act and GI Bill were in direct violation of the 14th Amendment that prohibit states from enforcing laws that discriminate against its black citizens.
Counselor, do you intend to read the entire 14th Amendment? This is really unnecessary. We know what it says.
Yes, Your Honor, we all know what it says, but we're here today to get to what it means. That's what the Declaration of Independence, when it says all men are created equal. Now, we know they didn't mean all men, and we certainly know that they didn't mean blacks.
Wait
I mean, this country...
Wait a minute. What do you mean you don't know what it means? It says all men. So therefore, it means all men. Your Honor, he's just making up battles that don't exist.
This country was created on duplicity, saying one thing and meaning something else. It's critical to our complaint that we examine the true meaning of the 14th Amendment, since it was specifically designed to address the duplicity and the unfair treatment of blacks at the end of the Civil War. So yes, I intend to read.
Go on, Counselor.
The 14th Amendment also states, no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This means that blacks not only should be compensated for the hundreds of years of slavery and their free labor, but also for their economic loss from being barred from fully participating in the previously mentioned federal programs that created a white middle class. Lastly, the 14th Amendment provides that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the law. This means that blacks should be free from the brutalization from the police. They shall not be profiled more than whites, nor arrested more than whites, not charged with a more serious crime for the same action, and nor not even given a longer sentence for the same crime. It also means that they should get the same level of services: medical care, police protection, housing and education as other taxpayers. That's what it says. That's what it means. But that's not what it is. And we seek reparation to correct this injustice.
False accusations, false accusations.
Excuse me?
Nothing, nothing. The very 14th Amendment that Mr. X so eloquently explained over and over again, that says that blacks are entitled to reparations, is the very reason why they are not entitled to reparations.
Sir, this hearing is not just about reparations. It's about about America allowing states to constantly violate our rights under the 5th and the 14th Amendment.
I think you're going to like what I'm going to say now. We agree with Mr. X that the 14th Amendment requires equal protection under the law, that all citizens are treated the same, that no citizen should be denied the right to life, liberty, or property without due process. But what Mr. X wants the court to ignore is that the 14th Amendment also entitles and helps white people. Yes, white people have come here under undue pain and suffering. Take, for instance, the Irish came here in the early 1700s as indentured servants, treated no better than slaves. Now I'm going to ask you, you don't have to answer, but I want you to consider this. Where are their reparations? Moreover, to ask white people to pay through their tax dollars for reparations is putting an undue burden on their backs. What blacks should, let me rephrase that. What blacks must do is pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, just like the Irish, the Germans, the Italians did when they came to this country. You know, this country has spent untold amounts of money on welfare, public assistance, Section 8 housing, passed civil rights legislation, the Voting Rights Act, all as a means of helping and supporting blacks who had difficulty gaining access to certain opportunities. What I don't want to hear is that this argument that you're making. And I think it's our intention here and the intention of the court to put an end to these false allegations that America supports racism and treats blacks as second-class citizens. It's outrageous, and frankly, it's your people's big lie.
Well, I believe that if someone is owed a debt, then that debt must be paid in full. If the debt is not paid in full, then that's why we end up in court. I also believe that a person or even a community of people have made social or mental or economic strides from this so-called debtor. They are not owed anything. Reparations are not charity. It is something that is earned.
When people are still feeling the effects of racism, police brutality, and school closings all over America, I believe some type of compensation is due. Someone's human rights have been violated. And here, in the year 2021, I am about to make the most important decision of my life.
Your Honors, this country has a long history of both receiving and providing reparations in the 20th and 21st century. We refer the court to Exhibit A. As part of the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I in 1918, Germany had to pay 132 billion gold marks, or the equivalent of $32 billion. Germany's payments were financed by a loan from the United States government, which was paid off some 90 years later in October of 2010. Similarly, in 1993, the United States Congress passed a joint resolution both acknowledging and apologizing to Native Hawaiians for the illegal United States-aided overthrow of the sovereign Hawaiian nation. Now, apparently, this is the real story of how Hawaii became a state that they don't teach us in school. Under the Hawaiian Homeland Act of 1920, people who could establish 50% Hawaiian heritage could lease land for $1. Finally, in 1993, the United States government agreed to a settlement of some $492 million with 17 Native American tribes to resolve lawsuits alleging that the federal government mismanaged tribal land, resources, and money.
You know, Your Honor, I hear a lot of statistics. It reminds me of an old saying. Statistics may not lie, but liars make statistics.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained, Mr. Feinberg. Don't make it personal.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honors, plaintiff has just done us a huge favor. Petitioner's Exhibit A is filled with examples of the benevolence of the United States and its dedication to deal with these injustices of the past, whether it be Native Americans, Hawaiians, or blacks. Petitioner is actually offering evidence that this country has sought to address these past wrongs. We wish we could turn back the clock and stop the injustice, but we can't. No one can. The law doesn't promise a perfect remedy, just a fair one. And I submit that Exhibit A is proof of the fairness of the United States of America.
Your Honors, once again, based on the clear language of the 14th Amendment, we charge that the United States government has not only failed to prevent, but they've also encouraged states to, number one, create and maintain an explicit and de facto second-class United States citizenship for blacks. Number two, encouraged and facilitated the deprivation of blacks in their lives, liberty, property, before the Emancipation Proclamation and up to and including to this very day. Number three, encouraged and facilitated the wholesale denial of equal protection under the law for black citizens in nearly every facet of life. Criminal prosecution, education, jobs, housing, lending. I could go on and on.
We appreciate your trip down memory lane. We simply cannot be held responsible for every issue that affects Black Americans today. If we did that, we'd never leave this courtroom.
Ms. Wilson, you are, what, Irish? And I believe that Feinberg is a Jewish name. And I'll just make an educated guess here, but I believe that Mr. Booker is African American.
Your Honor, I object. Is Counselor attacking the ethnicity of my team?
No. This is
that's
not an
rich.
attack. I'm just trying to make a point. May I continue?
Overruled, Mr. Feinberg. Go on, Ms. Sims.
You see, I don't think that they really understand what's happening here. But then again, maybe you do. But now, if you admit that you understand and that you get it, then that would just be an admission of guilt by America. We don't want to do that, do we? Now, I'm a little bit surprised, but I would think that Mr. Booker and Mr. Feinberg would understand people being mistreated, neighborhoods being bombed, and people being removed from their homeland. Now, I'm sure the Jewish community appreciated when America helped them to gain reparations during the Holocaust, but then Mr. Feinberg and your team want to sit here today and question us as to why we are seeking reparations?
Your Honor,
We forget.
I object. Is Counselor now attacking my heritage?
Okay, both of you. Knock it off.
Your Honors, the United States is the appropriate defendant. It is the creator of the rights that we seek to enforce. It is the perpetrator of the violations for which we seek relief. Lastly, it is the undeniable systemic cause of these continuing crimes and the only party capable of taking corrective actions and paying reparations.
Again, I believe that reparations are not charity. It is something that is earned.
Oh, Your Honor.
Let's dig into the reason why Black America is entitled to reparations. I will mention a few instances that are true and factual. Let's look at the New York draft riots in 1863. In response to the draft for men to fight in the Civil War, poor immigrants were forced to go to war, while rich Northerners could pay someone to take their place, and rich Southerners could send their slaves. This led to a violent uprising and riots in New York City. Now, the focus of those riots, however, were blacks. Several black orphanages in Manhattan were burnt to the ground. Blacks were pulled from their homes. They were beaten and killed by the dozens, if not hundreds. The white mob was allowed to rampage for several days without intervention from the government, the police, or the U.S. Army. That's just one example, but there were several others. This violence against Black America is something you don't read about in school. The Tulsa Massacre, 1921. The Rosewood Massacre in 1923. The Atlanta race riots in 1906. The Chicago race riots, and so on. Social media has allowed the world to see the injustices we receive every day. George Floyd, Sandra Bland are only two examples of a long list of murdered Black men and women.
First of all, America is not on trial. This is a hearing about reparations, a hearing to determine if America owes Black Americans. I'm not on trial. My partners are not on trial. So let's not make it like we are. Look, I've been able to help people of all races. Why? Because I've been blessed to be able to live this American dream. But we are representing the United States of America. So please, don't try and race bait us.
Your Honor, Black America is well within our rights for reparations. In the past, huge tracts of Native American land were given away for free to white settlers and white immigrants in the late 1800s under the Homestead Act of 1862. Now, we've all seen the movies where all the whites line up and race to the land they wanted. And all they had to do was place a stake in the ground. What the movies didn't show you were that blacks were excluded from the land giveaway, just like they were excluded or severely restricted from Social Security, the GI Bill, and federal home loan programs.
Your Honor, is Counselor now referring to Hollywood movies to make his case?
The movie reference, Mr. Feinberg, was to make a point. That thousands of acres of land given away to whites for free and the exclusion of blacks from the process was very real and very much a part of the history of this country. Race bait. I like that.
Again, plaintiff is graciously making our job a whole lot easier. They've been given examples of the generosity of this country to address what we can consider perceived injustices in this country. Besides, we're talking about very old wrongs. I mean, slavery was what, 150 years ago? And while I'm sure some have had it worse than others, I truly believe that some have surely benefited from the experience of being cared for by kind and benevolent men and women.
I've had enough of this. I'm not gonna sit here and listen to you wax on about the virtue of slavery from a viewpoint of a master servant. Feinberg's boy.
Objection, Your Honor.
I apologize, Your Honor. I was merely trying to educate my brother, colleague,
on the core elements of slavery, in which we asked this court to take judicial notice that even without the raw brutality and subhuman treatment that is well documented in the history of this country, that slavery consisted of treating human beings as animals and as property. You could be bought and sold. Your spouse and your children could be bought and sold. You pass the curse of slavery on to your children by the mere fact that you gave birth to them. A fate so dreaded that history details numerous accounts of mothers smothering their newborn so they didn't have to endure that fate.
Mothers smothering newborns. Mr. X, you do have a way with images. Just for the record, Your Honor, is it fair for counsel here to keep singling out a member of our team here? We're not on trial.
Your Honors, it is our contention that the second-class status of blacks has been unabated in an unbroken line even through today. Yes, there have been some improvements, and maybe racism is not as overt. However, institutional and systemic racism, it is still very substantial. It's never fully retreated, and the effects are ravaging, very substantial even to today.
We cannot deny that America's history has flaws. We cannot deny that African American history speaks for itself. But I can stand right here and say that the flaws in our system, the wrong this country has done, has far been outweighed by the strides that America and Black Americans have made.
Strides? Miss Wilson, this trial is about the 5th and the 14th Amendment and the violent history that America has shown towards Black Americans. Now, if you and your team cannot accept the truth, then it is what it is.
No country is perfect, and we will continue making mistakes. It's an outrage and an insult to the fine citizens of this country. America has laws in place to protect the people. All the people.
All the people. If the shoe fits.
Well, as you can see, the African American community where I'm from, no matter how you view it or see it, I'm a product of a successful system. Dedication, it's positive proof that I've taken advantage of all this country has allowed me to see. And it shows that I'm standing here representing a country that has given so much back to me. The civil rights movement really has such a positive impact in my life. And I find it disturbing, very disturbing, that these three opportunists, that they're using this as a chance for financial gain. Why is it we always have to bring up the term slavery when it comes to African Americans? Now look, maybe I'm just different, but I just believe if we have always continued to keep up this slave mentality, I'm not sure if the 44th president of this fine country would have not been Black.
Hey, I'm going to be closing with this. The question is Black America entitled to reparations? Is African Americans entitled to reparations.
Our question is, how do we determine who is to be given compensation?
Should we give money to every African American just because they are of African descent?
It's very hard to compensate anyone for any reason if you don't know who's to be compensated.
Meaning, just because you are of African descent doesn't mean that your ancestors were slaves. And if you have no proof or documentation, how can you justify it? You know,
We've been down this road before, and we stand by and support America's views on this issue.
we will not give a check to every person who considers themselves African American. You like images, Mr. X? I'll give you one. They'd be coming out of the woodwork like a bunch of roaches. For instance, if I was one part African, here's a better example.
It's my family, we did a DNA test years ago, and my son-in-law, who grew up in Texas and didn't really know his father, died very early, and his mother died before he was a teenager. He always thought he was Mexican. And when the DNA came back, he was a whole lot of Polish on his mother's side, and he had some American Indian blood in him. And
funny, he had 1% Congo blood in him. Now, with your logic, does he get a check? So I'm saying, where does it end? Where does it end? Where does it stop? You know, mentioned earlier, America has done so much for blacks to help them assimilate and take part in the American dream. Right here, you, Your Honor, are proof positive that you are part of the American dream.
When the Counselor for the United States talks about the Irish indentured servant having rights or being treated as a slave, there ain't no comparison. The indentured servant had rights. He could own property. He wasn't property. The curse of slavery wasn't passed on to his children. No one could come into his own home and legally rape his mother, daughter, or wife without consequences.
I object, Your Honor.
We ask the court to take notice of this distinction.
I object, Your Honor. He's using rape of women, and it's a cheap emotional ploy. It's grandstanding at its best. Have you no shame, Mr. X?
This case is about rape of black mothers, daughters, and wives by America. 96% of African Americans in the United States have white blood in their veins. There is only one way that this can happen. We would like to address the infamous 40 acres and a mule reparations, 1865, in which we submit highlights the second-class citizen status imposed on blacks after the Civil War, and continuing on to this day. On January the 12th, 1865, in the midst of the Civil War, General William T. Sherman and the U.S. Secretary of War, Edwin M. Stanton, met with 20 black leaders in Savannah, Georgia. 4 days later, General Sherman issued Special Field Order Number 15, stating that black people will receive one army mule and not more than 40 acres on the coastal plains of South Carolina and Georgia. And by June, roughly 40,000 black people had settled on 400,000 acres of land. Almost immediately after Lincoln's assassination, President Johnson, a former slave owner, began stripping, sometimes by force, the land from the black citizens and returned it back to white plantation owners.
I'm in awe. It saddens me to think that the government would rather reward treasonous white Confederate slave owners who actively engage in sedition and the outright attempt to overthrow the Union than to reward and give reparations to black citizens, thousands of black citizens, many who fought to preserve the Union. is sad. And this estimated value of 40 acres and a mule today, in today's value, is $6.4 million.
You know, it boggles me that those people were not even born when slavery was practiced.
You know, recently America found that money to finance a 20-year war in Afghanistan at a cost of between $5.8 trillion and $8 trillion. I believe America can pay for reparations for the harm done to its black citizens.
All right. We're going to take a recess here. Be back in 4 hours.
Say, man, what the hell was that? Look, I know I may not be the brother you think I am, but I did my job, and I've represented the United States of America. I did my job.
Man, even at the cost of the lives America's presented here today, I mean, come on, man. It took us how long to get here? And here we are being questioned by a man who let his job cloud his thinking. Brother.
After hours of reading notes and taking in all of the information from both sides, it is without question that Mr. Feinberg and his team has answered all of the petitioner's complaints in a way that shows how much progress Black Americans have made. We also looked at the fact that even though great progress has been made, there is still a problem with how Black people are viewed and treated in America today. And considering the treatment of Black people from slavery to now, there is cause for shame. The wrong done to Black Americans far outweighs the progress that Black people have made. And so we have decided to agree with the petitioner and say, yes, this case can move on, and America can be tried for not providing equal citizenship to Black people, for failing to provide equal protection under the law, and for failing to provide due process to its Black citizens.
I want to congratulate your team. Very good, very good. And we underestimated you. You ever want a job? We'll find a position for you. Now, you know this is as far as it's going to go. Do you really believe we're going to give you people anything? Think again, this is America. Play by our rules.
Know your rules. We're going to use your rules, your laws, your words to get justice. As a matter of fact, we're going to use your rules to get our check in the world court. Yes, yes. Never give up. Never give up. I mean, this is for King and Malcolm and for all of those that came before us so that we could be here today.